keynote presenter is one of the true champions of diversity in the Python community. As a leader of PyLadies DC community, she plays an active role in making Python accessible to an increasing number of women across the Washington DC area. She also co-founded the Young Coders workshops that have since taken place at many international Python conferences, offering an opportunity for young children to discover and develop an interest in programming. Katie is an author of 2 books, including the O'Reilly Accessibility Handbook. Today she'll be teaching us about the myths and delusions of accessibility. Questions at the end. Please welcome Katie Cunningham.
Hello everyone, thank you for the intro. As you said, I'm Katie Cunningham. I work at Cox Media Group in the US, and this is the book I wrote, Accessibility Handbook. I wrote it because there weren't any books that really took a usability perspective on accessibility. I got into the field of accessibility mostly out of frustration. I used to work at NASA, and when you work for the federal government in the US, every single application and app you push out has to be accessible to everyone. And this kept tripping us up because it's the last check as we would move out and go to deploy our application. The group, the accessibility group, would look over our application with a fine-tooth comb, and they would send it back to us every single time. And we would ask, what do we need to change? OK, you need to change this. Why? I don't have time to educate you. I've got 20 other apps I've got to look at. You've just do what I said and fix it, please. And there were times that we would fix it, send it back, and they'd find something new. And we never understood why this happened. We just thought they hated us. I think they did a little bit, but they didn't hate us for the reasons we thought. So one day we had a lull. The customer hadn't signed off on anything new, and they still had to pay us. So we sat around and decided to learn about accessibility, because we were really tired of having our applications blocked. It turned out to be a really fascinating field. It was full of much more diversity than we'd expected. It was much more interesting than we had expected. It was much more subtle than any of us had expected. Now, as a result, we learned about accessibility, spent a couple weeks just really talking about it, reading resources, finding resources. And as a result, once we did that, our applications, all of a sudden, were passing 508. They might find one minor thing, but it was kind of the thing where we would go, oh, I know it's changed, and you'd run back, change it, change the template, upload it again, and we'd pass. Before, they often had to give us 2 to 3 more weeks on our development cycle, which nobody wants. So a quick definition of what accessibility is. Though there's no shortage of definitions if you go on the internet and just ask what is accessibility, but all of them pretty much boil down to this: all the data and all the functionality for all the people. So if it's on your website as a piece of information that can be consumed, everybody should be able to access it. If it's a function that, like creating a new line in a spreadsheet or adding a record or playing a song, that also needs to be accessible to all the people. That's what accessibility is about. That's why access is in there. There's some way to do this. I don't know. Yeah, see? That's why access is in the name. So what do I mean when I talk about myths and delusions? I talk to people all the time about accessibility, and there's 2 themes that keep popping up. The first is myths, and this is where people are they're misinformed about what accessibility is. And that's usually pretty easy to overcome. You can correct them, and they're usually more than happy to go on their way. Delusions are the lies we tell ourselves. If we examine them for just more than a minute, we would realize we're deluding ourselves because we don't want to work any harder. We don't want to think any harder. We want to stay in our little sphere where everybody's body works perfectly. So the first myth, it's just about blind people, right? I get this one a lot. Many people focus so much on screen readers, they forget everybody else that accessibility covers. it's not just about blind people. When I talk about accessibility, I'm usually referring to 5 groups of people, like 5 individual groups. Now, the first is blind people. And this is anybody that uses a screen reader to access their application. Now, yes, we do talk about the blind quite a bit, but computers and the internet are a visual medium. And people that are blind have to use a screen reader, a completely different application, to access that data. So yeah, we do talk about them quite a bit. But they're not all there is, though. Next up is the visually disabled. These are people that no matter what you do to their eyeballs, what glass you put in front of it, what lasers you shoot into it, they're never going to have like 20/60 or 20/80 vision. They will never, and these aren't people that can correct to 20/20. This is when 20/20 is a pipe dream. They will never have it. This also includes, I also include people who are colorblind in this category. Because if many people use color on their websites to indicate information. So you might have a graph where it says, okay, the red, this one is, how many people like sandwiches, how many people like, cake, that kind of thing. Or intensity, like how strong of an effect are we talking about? How many koalas are in this county versus, what do you call them, states? States. How many koalas are in this state versus this state? I'm trying to localize this for you so you understand. If you use colors that a colorblind person can't tell the difference between, or one looks more intense than the other, then they have a problem accessing that information. Let's see. Storytime. When Apple first came out with the iPhone, you could go on their website and look up a store and see how, do they have the iPhone yet? And they had, yes, they had them, no, they were out. And it looked like this. Some people know where this is going. So, yeah. So red meant that they had no iPhones left. Green meant they had some left. Now, this is what somebody who has red-green color blindness, what it looks like. Thanks, Apple. It's great. This is kind of a lesson that we sometimes think that big companies would never make such a simple mistake as this, and they totally did. Now, to their credit, when it was caught, they had it fixed. So it was one of my coworkers noticed this, and he took the screenshot, and like 2 hours later, it was fixed. But even big companies can make this simple of a mistake. Moving on, we have the hearing disabled. This not only includes people in the deaf community, but people who have partial hearing loss. Partial hearing loss is kind of misunderstood because people see a hearing aid and they're like, oh, you're cool, you're fixed. And that's not necessarily the case. If you're missing certain sounds, no amplification can bring those sounds to your ear. And what's funny is people think that, oh, they just don't hear those sounds. Like it would be like a record popping. But your brain is super smart. So what it does is it backfills those sounds. So you hear this cloud of clear sounds and not clear sounds. If you know anybody who complains that everybody around them mumbles, they probably have hearing loss. Because it's not like your hearing is going away and getting quieter. You lose chunks of it because of the way your ear works. We also have the physically disabled. These are people who they may have trouble moving. They may have lost movement. You might have people who have very shaky and jerky movement. Some of these people can only use a keyboard. Some of them can only use a mouse. Some of them just need more time. Sometimes it's a pain issue. People with arthritis or injuries might be limited to how long they can do something. A lot of people with arthritis have trouble with games where you have to hold a mouse for too long because your hand starts to really hurt after a while. So, if you're playing a game, okay. But if you're like trying to do your taxes in the US and you use certain sites, they give you like 30 minutes to get through the stupid form. And that's really hard if you have motion issues. finally, we have the cognitively disabled. And this is more than people with intellectual disabilities. This also includes people with information processing disabilities, like dyslexia and ADD or ADHD. Most people think of dyslexia and ADD and ADHD about, either it's a vision issue or it's an attention issue, but it's really not. It's about how your brain is processing information. Now, what are computers really good at? But spitting out a ton of information. You could see where this would start to become a problem. So, first delusion, I don't have any disabled users. I've had people say this to me. And it's one of those ones that gets me really riled up. Don't say it to me when I've had like a few bourbons, because I did almost get kicked out of a bar at PyCon for yelling at a guy over this. So according to the Australian Network for Disability, there are 4 million people in Australia who have a disability. That's 1 in 5. That's twice the population of Brisbane, according to our little pamphlet, which I actually read. So if your site has more than a dozen users, chances are very good that you've had somebody with a disability on your website. So let's break it down. 3.4 million Australians have a physical disability. Some of these may impact computer use, some may not. 1 in 6 has some form of hearing loss. Around 600,000 people in Australia have some form of developmental disability. 10% of the population has dyslexia. 1% is on the autistic spectrum, which also impacts how they take in information. 5 to 10% of the population of Australia has ADD or ADHD. And 1 in 10 men in Australia are colorblind. Now, you may be wondering why these numbers don't seem to add up. If you add them up, let me go back real fast. If you add them up, you're like, that doesn't quite. One of the great things about having a disability is that you often don't just get one. Many people who have disabilities have multiple, which is why you also can't forget a group or think they're not important. Because chances are somebody who has hearing loss might also have vision loss. Somebody with motion disorder might also have an intellectual disability or a cognitive disorder. Now, if you look around, you might say, I don't see that many disabled people. If there were that many disabled people, and I would have figured this out a long time ago. 90% of all disabilities are considered invisible, meaning they're not in a wheelchair. There is no cane. There's nothing to indicate that this person has a disability. It's a myth. It's just the US, right? That's that 508 thing. We call it 508 in the US because that's the bill number, and we're super boring like that, and we'll call everything by a number. So it's not just the US. Actually, most countries have a mandate about accessibility. In Australia, it is a federal requirement that government websites be accessible to all people, no matter how they're accessing it or what disability they have. In Australia, that means you follow the WCAG 2.0 requirements that were set up by the W3C. Now, that is just for government websites, which most people in this room probably do not build. But that doesn't mean you'll never need to be accessible. In the US, several large corporations have been taken to court over inaccessible websites. The law that was used was not the law about accessible websites. It was the one about physical access to buildings. And the logic was, you have this website, you also have a physical building. You could no more block me from getting into your building if it's a public place than I should be able to access your website, because it is also public. All of these were settled out of court. Target was one of them. I think Walmart got hit too. They were all settled out of court, so there's not officially any case law in America, but it's coming. It's getting harder and harder for these places to dodge, and it's becoming more and more likely that at some point somebody's going to say, I'm not going to take an out-of-court settlement, and we are taking this all the way to the Supreme Court. And once it happens in America and a few other countries, it really rapidly happens in all other countries. When 508 standards hit the US, If you look at when they hit other countries, it was within a few years. All of a sudden, these standards went up. And they all mirror each other very closely. Another delusion, I can't afford it. I hear this one all the time, and I once had somebody tell me that he couldn't possibly be accessible because he would have to double his development budget. And my response was like, what kind of crap app have you built? You know, seriously, some alt text is going to kill you. You can't caption your videos. I mean, I priced captioning videos for a project I was on. It's not that expensive. You can totally outsource that and have somebody caption your videos for you. You know, a lot of this stuff, it's not that expensive. So if that murders your budget, you've spent nothing on development. Myth. There's a checklist, right? I get this question all the time. People ask me for a checklist that they can use to make their site accessible. So they want a list that they can just check off all the items, and once everything's checked off, their site is perfectly accessible. I'm like, okay, I'll give you a deal. I'll give you that checklist. As soon as you give me a checklist, when I check off everything on that list, my site is totally usable and pretty. Or my code's really clear and well-maintained. You know, what's the checklist for nobody is going to hate me for this code later? You know, what's the checklist for this will make me money? Usually this is something you learn through experience. The problem is that a checklist is not a tool for a novice. A checklist is a tool for an expert to communicate with the person who needs to fix the problem. That's what it's for. There's a whole lot more thinking that goes behind a checklist. Like, you couldn't fly a plane because you have the checklist of what you have to fill out before you take off, right? Okay, he says, okay. So don't you know, that's not going to allow you to fly the plane. And there are checklists out there. So if you search for accessibility checklist or 508 checklist, you will find some. But they're not for you, unless you happen to also be an accessibility person. Now, what accessibility boils down to and why you can't do a checklist is this right here. Accessibility is usability for a group of users who have additional needs. Because there are no usability checklists, there are no accessibility checklists that work the way you think they should. So delusion. Technology has solved this issue. Technology is so awesome that disabled people are like barely even disabled. Have you seen the people running in the Special Olympics? They're faster than people. They're like superheroes now. Technology has done quite a bit to help those who are disabled. There are add-ons that tweak colors for the colorblind, and screen readers that read out websites, and keyboards you can use with just one hand, or you can use it with puffs of air or your tongue. There's a lot of technology out there that has really improved the lives of people who are disabled, but it can't do it all. We developers move way faster than the accessibility community can. There's not that many people working on this technology compared to y'all. Consider the fact that I'm one of the few people in the Python community that knows about this, and how many are there of us in this community? Because there's so few of us, we can't keep up, you know, and we're constantly trying to race ahead to try to catch up with what you've done with the latest technology. We need to be better as developers about reaching back so that we accessibility people don't have as far to run trying to catch up. I love this myth. Oh my God, this is another one that almost got me kicked out of a bar. Flash is totally accessible is a myth. Now, happily, I don't have to have this argument as much anymore because Flash is no longer cool. Thank you, Apple. It's one of the few things I will thank you for. But it does come up occasionally. Flash is not accessible. It just isn't. I don't care that they have a very pretty subsite about how to make accessible Flash. It's all BS. It's almost certain that when the Flash developer was working on whatever they were working on, they forgot one of those groups I outlined earlier. They just left somebody out. I mean, even if a screen reader can go through and like use your app, what about somebody who needs to change the font? People who are severely dyslexic often need to change the fonts on your website. And if they can't do that, they cannot read it. What about people who need different colors in order to see it? People who are autistic, who have dyslexia, who have ADD and ADHD often change font colors to help them concentrate. You can't do that in a Flash app. I've yet to run across one that is fully 100% accessible, and if it was, I would be like, why didn't you just make a stupid website at this point? You know, and as I said, I've seen a lot of Flash, and not a single one has ever passed the sniff test. So if you happen to be in a large organization where they have this one little dusty corner and there's this stupid Flash app you have to touch like twice a year and you hate it, congratulations, you now have an excuse to can it and redo it how you want. Because you can be like, it's not accessible, we should do this so we're not jerks. Delusion. Disabled people are experts at being disabled. This is another part of the Superman myth of the disabled. Not every disabled person, though, was born disabled. Many people become disabled later in life. When that happens, it can take months, sometimes even years, to be able to fully work around their disability. And also, not everyone is permanently disabled. So let's do story time. In 1999, I was bitten by my iguana, my pet iguana. It wasn't a tiny iguana, it was a 5.5-foot long iguana. He bit my hand, severing 4 tendons. It took 300 stitches and a year of physical therapy to get my hand back to anywhere close to where it had been before. Because he had bitten my dominant hand, of course, I couldn't write. I could barely type. Like I was down to 10 words a minute from, whatever I was doing before. I couldn't even sign my name, which caused a surprising number of problems because people would ask me to sign my name. So I'd have to use my left hand because my right hand literally didn't move for 3 months and then was like a little bit I could move. So I would go to sign something. They would check the back of my card. This doesn't look like your signature. I'm like, yes, I know I was injured. Well, it doesn't look like your signature. I don't think I can let you purchase this. It's like, give me my stupid coffee. I'm not trying to, steal. And I'm like, I'm injured. I'm using the wrong hand. And there were a lot of things. They just stopped me. Like, no, you can't have this. I also couldn't drive during this time because although I know everyone in the room's like, I drive with one hand all the time. In emergency situations, you need both hands. And my other hand did not work. I couldn't get commands to it. The nerves had been fried, and it took a year to where I could actually move my hand again. I couldn't properly dress myself or wash my hair. Try it one day. Just wrap up a hand and try to get dressed. Fortunately, at the time I was in college, so I was still at home, and my mother was helping me get through day-to-day life, and she likened it to taking care of a very large baby that cursed a lot. During this time, I had professors who were demanding that I still attend class and take notes and write papers and take exams. And this was back in the old days where we didn't get to take them on computers, where you had to write out your essay with your hand that wasn't working because a stupid iguana had bitten it. But they didn't understand. They're like, use your other hand. And I was like, you are an asshole. And I couldn't even take notes in class. I would try to take notes, and they would be on to the next topic, and I'm still writing the first sentence. I ended up dropping out. It was very, very hard to fight that battle when you're just struggling to get through one day. Looking back, I blame myself at the time, and now I look back and I'm like, they were jerks. The least they could have done is given somebody to help me write notes, or something. But at the time, all they saw was a little bandage on my hand, and they said, you must be fine. Another myth. You can't make iOS and Android apps accessible. I have good news for you here. This was one of my most pleasant discoveries that I found out as I was studying accessibility. It's actually really easy to make accessible iOS and Android apps. So I was showing a coworker how to use a screen reader on his Mac. And he kept forgetting like the keys, and he'd get lost, and the thing was like yelling at him, and he's like, stop talking. And he'd look at the screen, even though I said, don't look at the screen, it's just going to confuse you, you should turn it off. And he's like, no, it's a big mess. He was really frustrated. Later that afternoon, I said, well, let me show you how to use the accessibility features on your phone. And he had it in under an hour. And he actually still uses it to listen to blog posts while he runs. He'll start up the screen reader, start it reading, put it in his back pocket, and go for a run. Smartphones have the advantage of being developed after accessibility became a mandate in many countries. Governments are big purchasers of smartphones, so developers behind Android and iOS made sure that their accessibility features were top-notch and easy to develop for. Browsers haven't been as kind to us. Also, because you're working with a smaller screen, the interfaces are, I hope, simpler. So I love it when somebody comes to me and they say, can you help me make our mobile application accessible? I usually have a really easy job in front of me because there's not that much to check. So if you develop for iOS or Android, accessibility for those is so easy. Like you don't even have an excuse. Myth, I can't test for accessibility. JAWS is expensive. Okay, like the myth part is not JAWS. JAWS is crazy expensive. For those who don't know, JAWS is a screen reader for Windows that you purchase. And it's like $900 American, so similar Australian probably. No, you all get upcharged on stuff like that, don't you? Yeah, I listen to Zero Punctuation. I know what's happening. So JAWS is the Cadillac of screen readers. If you use it to test your website, though, you don't need a caddy, really. Every major operating system out there comes with a screen reader. These are perfectly serviceable screen readers, and they work. They work for what you need. And if you're developing on a Mac or Linux, you weren't going to get JAWS anyway, because JAWS is just for Windows. Now, if you do want to test on Windows, and you don't like the Windows one, I highly recommend checking out NVDA by NV Access. It is awesome. It's free, it's open source, and it's written in Python. Yes. This delusion. We're going to write our site, and we'll fix it. We will totally make it accessible once we're done. Don't you lie to me. No, you're not. You're never going to do that. You're not going to come back. And you know what? You shouldn't do it in that order anyway. I get calls from people all the time who want to make their site accessible, and they pull me in after the stupid thing is done. So I have to go through, and they've made some mistakes that if I had pointed out in the beginning, it would have been no problem. They would have gone ahead and just run through and fixed it, and they wouldn't have made the mistake in the first place. But because I'm doing it afterwards, I have to go and clean up all the places where it's like, no, you can't do that way. The places where you just, like, okay, I made some crap JavaScript and threw it in there because it kind of works, and okay, now everything's fine. But you actually screwed up another part of the site that you don't actually test. It's just way cheaper to think about it from the beginning. So don't say this. If you say we'll fix it later, you're going to regret trying to fix it later. You should think about it from the beginning. Myth, it only benefits disabled people. There's a saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. A website that has been made accessible is often better for everyone. In order for a screen reader to work, your HTML has to validate. I have never known anyone that's like, God, our HTML is just too good. We've got to crap this up a bit. Picking colors that work for colorblind people force you to think about your color choices. How many people who are not like designers just throw some colors together and think that works, let's move on? Forcing yourself to slow down and stop and think is always a good thing when it comes to things like color choice. Having like captions On videos, first of all, that benefits anybody who doesn't have their headphones that day and is at work and wants to watch your LOL video, but can't play the audio. It also helps your SEO, because now you have that text there that you can actually make searchable so people can find that. Making elements large enough to click on help not only people who have motion disorders, but anybody else who does not want to spend time trying to click the world's tiniest checkbox, or those little plus signs people put on things to expand things. Oh, I hate those. I really do. I'm so glad they're falling to the wayside. Now you can click the whole thing, because nobody liked those. If you've done that, everybody hates you. And my favorite, people with information processing disabilities dislike things like all caps, busy backgrounds, gratuitous motion, poor contrast. But who does like those things? None of us are going, I wish these advertisements moved more. That'd be great. Oh, I love it when it rearranges the site in the middle of the article. That's nice. We all hate these things too. The difference is we hate it, it makes it unusable for them. However, if you make it accessible to them, it's a much nicer experience for the rest of us. Delusion. I'll never need it. I get it. You're healthy, you're careful, you don't own an iguana. You don't think you'll ever have to deal with having a disability. Well, there's a large group of people that are learning that, no, they will have to deal with having a disability. They're called baby boomers. Born between the end of World War II and the mid-60s, many countries, including Australia, experienced a sudden rise in their birth rate. These babies, called the boomers, are now in their late 40s to early 60s. They're discovering that aging sucks. As you age, no matter how healthy you are, you eventually fall into one of the categories I laid out earlier. Your vision starts to go. Your hearing starts to go. If you have a condition like Parkinson's, you may have a motion disorder suddenly. You may have arthritis, which limits how long you can use your laptop. If you have something like dementia or Alzheimer's, you will start having cognitive impacts. Now, the sad truth about these two conditions is it's not instant. There's usually a good decade of time where you are slowly losing what capabilities you have, but you're still trying to live independently. Now, making it so that they can live independently longer is better for everybody, but if they suddenly can't fill out forms, how do you survive? How do you pay bills? How do you get by in your day-to-day life? There's nothing special about boomers, though. They're just getting older. And I'm sorry for any boomers that I'm depressing in the audience. It's aging. It's happening to all of us. For those in Generation X, it's happening already. Because I have many friends that have several pairs of reading glasses that are stashed around their person in case they forget one. So it's in their laptop bag, it's in their purse, it's in their jacket, it's in their car, because they're starting to realize that they can't read without them. And they're starting to complain about dim restaurant lighting. Some of them have actually started having things, discovering they have arthritis. So they're starting to age too. Millennials, you're safe for now, but not for long. Even if the idea of aging is far into the future for you, you can still break an arm. You can still, hurt your hand. You might get sick and need pain meds. When I hurt my hand, I was on crazy amounts of painkillers, like the kind that were just below what the hospital needed to dispense. And then they're like, hey, here's all your happy drugs. Now here, go fill out these medical forms. And I misspelled my name multiple times. My mother came out, she's like, your middle name has one L, not two. I'm like, damn it. So, and I was lucky. I had a family that swooped in and took care of everything like I was a child again. Many people don't have that. So it was basically impossible. I don't know what would have happened to me had I not had family during that time. So if you won't do it for the people that are disabled, disabled today, do it for the person you will be in 10, 20, or 30 years. Right now, everything is moving out of the analog world and into the digital. Now then is the time for accessibility to become a habit. Now is the time when we build systems that can be used by everyone. Now is also the time to train the next generation so that accessibility becomes a habit that everyone has instead of a niche discipline that a few people have that are extremely overloaded right now. Now is the time to build cultures where we think about more than just the average user and think about all the users. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Katie. So we've got some time for questions. We've got some Q&A mics set up here, so please line up there.
All right, first of all, great talk, thank you.
Thank you.
We have actually worked on some government websites, and we have to live up to the WCAG 2.0. And you say there isn't a checklist. It is an actual checklist. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty terrible checklist. But, sorry, I have a lot of questions, but I'll limit it to one. If you do graphs on a website, like you have lots of numbers and you display them in a pretty graph with dot points, how do you show that to a blind person or?
With graphs, describe it to a friend over the phone. So if you're trying, like we often, I'm from the government too, they love graphs, trust me. So many graphs at NASA. And what I would do is I would have a graph that said, I would say, okay, we start off around this level, there is a peak at this level at this time, falling off gradually to a low at this time. So pretend you're narrating a radio show. You use human language, but you just describe what the data points are. I'm still working with somebody who does linguistics, trying to make a more naturalistic, so you can do that automatically. It's slow going because linguistics is a difficult, and it's hard to get his time. It's sometimes a little difficult, but that's the advice I have for most people, is that when you're generating those graphs, try to describe it in as human a way as possible, or if they're automatically generated, figure out a way that you can say, okay, in general, what do these graphs look like? And describe low, peak, and rate, and then maybe give them an option. It's like, if you want to have a more granular view, go over here. I cover that. It's a tricky problem because you are trying to convey information, but you don't want to be too granular because that's not why we use graphs. Because graphs are used to summarize information. So you just kind of want the summarization, like a rising trend, a falling trend, a quickly falling trend, no trend, flat line, that kind of stuff.
Have you seen any tools that do that automatically? Like, because we do have, you filter by something and you get a result from that. Mm-hmm. We would display the maximum, the minimum, the average.
Yeah, and that's a good start.
But it's very hard to go any further than that automatically.
Not yet. It's slow working on it because we're also two very busy people that we've been going back and forth, and even just trying to figure out the logistics. And of course, they're working with a linguist. They're like super picky. And they're like, oh, no, you've got to be more natural than that. And I don't understand linguistics always. So, but are you staying around for the sprints?
I'm not, no.
Well, catch me during the day and we can talk about.
Sure, I'd love that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks again for the talk. All right, so sold. Accessibility is awesome. I want to do all of it. How do I level up, other than buying your book? Or in addition to buying your book, okay. How do I level up?
My book is a good starting point because it is less technical and more about the tools that people use so you understand, because that's your first step, is understanding the disabilities, like deeply. Knowing the tools they use, knowing how to use a screen reader, knowing what it's like to navigate via a keyboard. What are the tools they use? Then, I do like Pro HTML5 accessibility because it is a technical book and it gives you lots of just like, oh, you need to do this, here you go. You'll be learning ARIA. ARIA is really cool. It is the fastest spec to make it into the HTML spec ever. They wrote it, and a few months later it was in. But ARIA basically gives roles to HTML elements, so you can treat things kind of, as objects. So browsers know what to do when they hit something that it's like, oh, this is an application. Oh, this is a drag and drop. So you can do drag and drop without a mouse, which is super cool. I love playing with those. Hang around accessibilitypsu.edu. This is the best accessibility site. If you go around, you'll be like, I recognize some of these names. These seem really familiar. The reason why, anybody know what Plone is? We've got a few hands. The people who were big players in Plone when it first started, this is where they're from. This is the site they helped create. Plone is a 508 compliant, accessible, it's an accessible CMS written in Python, which is one of their big selling points. Many of them are there. So you'll see names that look really familiar. But it has a lot of great examples, that kind of stuff. Of course, you all should read the W3org WCAG 20 or 2.0, because that's what you're supposed to be following. And the last two, VisCheck is just a way to visually check what different colorblindness. You can actually upload a screenshot of your site or point it to a link, and it'll say, here's what it looks like with all these different, versions of colorblindness. And it helps you pick different, color schemes. So a lot of it is do some reading. And just start really thinking about it every time you go and do something, every time you write some code or deal with some front end. Think about, separate the information in the presentation, and make sure the information, the functionality can get to everyone.
Last question, please.
You talked a little bit about ARIA. Can you give an indication of sort of how well deployed ARIA is in actual screen readers? Because I know that historically there's been a problem that screen readers are crazy expensive, and then you have to pay for the upgrade. So a lot of users end up with a sort of 5-year-old, 10-year-old screen reader because they can't afford to buy new copies as they get updated.
I don't know how recent JAWS, but I know JAWS does have it. I don't know how long ago. However, I do know that the screen reader for Macs is fully compliant, and that one's free. If you want to turn it on, by the way, it is function, or it's like Command F5, and that will turn it on. And it'll start, your computer will immediately start speaking to you. Just so don't do it when you don't want to make noise. But it also has a tutorial as you go through. But yes, I know Mac's caught up. Let's see, I think, NVDA is caught up, so they have ARIA support. ARIA support at this point is pretty good. JAWS will always make me angry about how expensive it is, just because it's like, you guys are jerks. And that's why I really, tell everybody about NVDA, because NVDA is free, and it's for Windows, and it's really cool, and I think more people should use it instead of JAWS.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming all the way out here to give that keynote, Katie. It's important, and it was very well done. So
thanks
very much.